Hello everyone, this is Crypto BitLaw, back with another video. Today we're going to be discussing the Ukraine-Russia situation, in particular sanctions that are being imposed on the Russians and the Russian economies as it relates to crypto and cryptocurrencies and the efforts the United States is taking in order to make sure that the Russians aren't using crypto to evade sanctions. We're also going to talk a little bit about how the Ukrainians are receiving crypto donations and where they stand with funding their resistance efforts using these crypto donations. But before we dive in, if you enjoy this content, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. We really appreciate that. And with that said, let's dive right on in. All right, so as we all know, this situation is very fast evolving, and there's a lot of ground to cover. So we're going to go through the most important parts here and really parse them out and put them in a nice digestible form. So first up, we have this Decrypt article that states, Yellen says Treasury will monitor crypto and other channels for sanctions evasion. Yellen suggested the cryptocurrency sector wasn't one Russia could easily use to evade sanctions. So pretty much the summary of this is that several Senate Democrats asked Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen how the department would make sure crypto couldn't be used to bypass sanctions against Russia. Yellen said the Treasury Department actively monitors sanctions enforcement. So that's pretty broad. That doesn't really give us too much information as to how they're actually going about doing it. It's kind of like that typical non-answer. But let's dive a little deeper down in here and see how the actual exchanges that operate are handling their sanctions against Russia, or the U.S. sanctions against Russia. So here we see many major exchanges have attested that they are complying with the applicable sanctions against Russia, though they refused a request from the Ukraine Minister of Digital Transformation, Mikhailo Fedorov, to, quote, block addresses of Russian users. I mean, that would be against typical blockchain ethos to just to segregate an entire sect of users, but I suppose it is possible if you're operating a centralized exchange. It's the beauty of decentralization. But continuing on, in a statement to Decrypt on February 28th, the spokesperson for Binance said the exchange was, quote, taking the steps necessary to ensure we take action against those that have had sanctions levied against them while minimizing the impact to innocent users. It added, quote, should the international community widen those sanctions further, we will apply those aggressively as well. All right, so that's how Binance is handling things. Coinbase told Decrypt that it was taking, quote, a number of actions to ensure compliance with the latest sanctions, including regularly screening sanction watch lists and blocking transactions to prohibited addresses identified by the OFAC and others. Okay, so that's good. That's how Coinbase is handling them. They're monitoring addresses. In a Twitter thread Tuesday, Blockchain Association head of policy Jake Chervinsky challenged the argument that Russia could easily bypass sanctions using Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. Wrote Chervinsky, quote, U.S. crypto companies offer a variety of services. Russia doesn't get to use them anymore. That's the sanction. Just as with all goods and services, Russia's ability to use the underlying technology doesn't let them, quote, evade the sanction in any way. He also argued that the crypto markets are too small and public blockchains too transparent to be effective for Russia to evade sanctions. Quote, concerns about crypto's use for sanctions evasions, he said, are totally unfounded. All right, well, that's some good information. It's good to see that, I mean, despite Yellen's non-answer, pretty much, the actual meat of it in regards to how these exchanges are operating comes in the form of blocking addresses of Russian users, blocking transactions to prohibited addresses, and screening sanction watch lists. So that's good. At least, there is some sort of action and protocol in place for these U.S.-based exchanges to comply with the sanctions against the Russians. Okay, next up, we can see that Cointelegraph reports that U.S. lawmakers and Fed chair push for crypto regulation in wake of Russia's sanctions. Jerome Powell said that the situation with Russia, quote, underscores the need for really congressional action on digital finance, including cryptocurrencies. They say, Federal Reserve Chair pro tempore Jerome Powell and some members of the United States House of Representatives called for congressional action on crypto in response to discussions about Russia potentially evading sanctions. In a Wednesday hearing of the House Financial Services Committee on, quote, monetary policy and the state of the economy, California Representative Juan Vargas asked Powell if cryptocurrency could be a, quote, way out for Russia looking for financial transactions in the wake of the United States and European Union cutting the country off from the SWIFT payment network. The Fed chair said that the situation with Russia, quote, underscores the need for really congressional action on digital finance, including cryptocurrencies, adding, there isn't in place the kind of regulation framework that there needs to be. What's needed is a framework, in particular, ways to prevent these unbacked cryptocurrencies from serving as a vehicle for terrorist financing and just criminal behavior. General criminal behavior, tax avoidance, and the like. Okay, that's pretty fuddy, Jerome. Let's continue on. Let's see what else is going on. Connecticut Representative Jim Himes echoed Powell's sentiment at the hearing, noting the effectiveness of the sanctions against Russia. However, he added that the U.S. not leading the world in regulatory clarity of cryptocurrencies left the door open to foreign nations that may not always have the best intentions. On the other side of the Hill, Senate Banking Committee members Elizabeth Warren, Mark Warner, Sherrod Brown, and Jack Reed penned a letter to Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen on Wednesday expressing concerns that Russia and other nations could use crypto to, quote, hide cross-border transactions for nefarious purposes, including undermining sanctions. The lawmakers cited North Korea using, quote, stolen cryptocurrency to fund its nuclear weapons program and Iran promoting Bitcoin mining while under U.S. sanctions. And then here we could see is Elizabeth Warren, the insufferable Elizabeth Warren and her crypto FUD, stating, quote, in a tweet that she penned, cryptocurrencies risk undermining sanctions against Russia, allowing Putin and his cronies to evade economic pain. U.S. financial regulators need to take this threat seriously and increase their scrutiny of digital assets. I mean, as an aside, I mean, for someone that is such a champion of the everyman and the little guy, and she seems to be on her face so anti-big banks and what have you, I can't believe she is so adamant in fudding crypto and the one technology that ever really posed a serious threat to big banks. It is just beyond me that the insufferable Elizabeth Warren continues to FUD like this. Okay, that's enough of my aside. Continuing on, the lawmakers requested information on the steps the Treasury Department was taking to, quote, enforce sanctions compliance by the cryptocurrency industry. The letter also implied that the department's Office of Foreign Assets Control, or the OFAC, was becoming increasingly reliant on, quote, voluntary self-disclosure from sanctions violators for enforcement, an approach ill-suited for the crypto space. Yeah, I mean, who's going to self-report that? Come on. I hate to say I agree with them on that one. The OFAC issued regulations effective on Tuesday, warning U.S.-based companies and individuals not to facilitate crypto transactions sent to certain Russian nationals and banks in compliance with sanctions ordered by the Biden administration. However, Senator Warren, Warner, Brown, and Reed are seeking additional clarification from the Treasury Department on the OFAC's tools, coordination with foreign governments, and other challenges enforcing sanctions when dealing with cryptocurrencies by March 23rd. Quote, strong enforcement of sanctions compliance in the cryptocurrency industry is critical, given that digital assets which allow entities to bypass the traditional financial system may increasingly be used as a tool for sanctions evasion, said the four senators. Now, a lot of what we're seeing here, it's not really surprising, but it's kind of scary in a sense that, you know, these lawmakers are attempting to divert and manipulate the way that crypto is at its core laid out to be, you know, a decentralized means of transmission and exchange, and trying to centralize it such that you are blacklisting certain addresses that aren't playing ball the way you would otherwise like them to. And I think this kind of underscores the need for DeFi, decentralized finance, and just decentralized exchanges, dApps, any sort of non-centralized entity that can play an integral part in the exchange of crypto, the handling, the transmission, just the basic infrastructure of these digital assets. Because we're seeing right here, I mean, just playing out in front of our eyes, the extent that the government or governments around the world are trying to go to in order to clamp down on this space and really centralize it. So, I mean, yeah, you can ban certain, you could blacklist certain addresses and have a certain watch list up if you're operating through a centralized exchange. So individual parties can't use that centralized exchange to actually purchase the crypto on that exchange and then offload it like that. You know, if you were to do an OTC deal or what have you. But, I mean, good luck doing that to a DEX. You know, you couldn't do that to a decentralized exchange or anything that operates in a truly DeFi-based manner. So I have yet to see how they would address that issue, but I mean, it's really, is it shocking to anyone that the governments throughout the world are going to try to get all of the centralized exchanges in lockstep to implement their controls on these exchanges, blacklisting certain parties? Really not surprising. That's what centralization leads to, and that's the beauty of a decentralized system, is that you can't have that. And I'm not saying, it's a good or a bad thing with regards to sanctions. I think it's a tragedy which what happened with the Russians invading Ukraine. I'm just speaking on a macro level with how DeFi operates and the implications of a libertarian-based ethos with regards to blockchain and digital assets. That's all my commentary would expound upon. But let's continue on. All right, next up, we can see that New York State ramps up blockchain monitoring to enforce sanctions. Blockchain analytics will help ensure that New York licensed companies don't send money to sanctioned Russians. And this is important because New York is essentially the hub of global trade. So, housing the New York Stock Exchange and Wall Street, what happens in New York echoes around the world. So let's see what this is all about. They say New York State's effort to enforce sanctions against Russia have ramped up a gear, with the Department of Financial Services, or DFS, expediting the procurement of additional blockchain analytics technology. According to a statement released Wednesday, the department will use the technology to help detect exposure to Russian individuals and entities subject to federal sanctions by the virtual currency businesses licensed by the department. New York requires individuals and companies engaged in a number of activities with virtual currency to apply for a BIT license. The DFS is now, quote, assessing a number of technology tools and service providers to augment current supervisory capabilities. No other details were given about how the analytics technology the state is looking for. The DFS held a tech sprint, quote, intensive problem-solving sessions meant to facilitate innovation, collaboration, and creative solutions to difficult problems, to design a digital regulatory reporting mechanism for virtual currency companies in March 2021. It was noted at the time that the event organizers were working with some of the participants to advance the development of their solutions. Blockchain analysis is typically used to assure anti-money laundering compliance and consumer protection. The process often combines the tracing of the transfers on the blockchain with information obtained off-chain to understand transactions. All right, and as we can see here, the European Union is jumping into the fray as well. Decrypt reports that the EU is taking measures to prevent Russia evading sanctions with crypto. France's finance minister, Bruno Le Maire, said the European Union is making sure cryptocurrencies don't let Russia evade sanctions. They say the European Union is set to crack down on Russia's ability to evade economic sanctions using cryptocurrencies, according to France's finance minister, Bruno Le Maire. Quote, we are taking measures in particular on cryptocurrencies or crypto assets which should not be used to circumvent the financial sanctions decided upon by the 27 EU countries, Le Maire reportedly said yesterday. Also, a prevailing fear is that Russia could pivot to types of ransomware as a means of using cryptocurrencies to evade sanctions. According to blockchain analytics firm Chainalysis, about 3/4 or 74% of the world's global ransomware revenue in 2021 came from sources, quote, highly likely to be affiliated with Russia. In Russia's famous Moscow skyscraper, Vostok, the country also houses several crypto-related businesses that process, quote, substantial transaction volume from illicit sources, per Chainalysis. Former FBI agent Crane Hassold also recently told Decrypt that cryptocurrencies are the primary factor driving today's ransomware landscape. It essentially allows the overall ransomware payments that we've seen previously to scale to numbers that are pretty crazy, said Hassold. So, my takeaway, it's not surprising that the EU is jumping in on board with this whole narrative of trying to prevent or put the measures in place to prevent Russia or Russians from evading global sanctions using cryptocurrency because it operates outside of the traditional financial infrastructure. So, not surprising, and it's also not surprising that the Russians would seek to use ransomware as a means to garner some sort of nefarious gain in the form of cryptos, right? So, interesting. All right, next up, this is pretty awesome. Ukraine is now accepting Dogecoin donations amidst the Russian invasion. Just days after Ukraine began accepting crypto donations, the government added Dogecoin to its list of accepted cryptocurrencies today. This is so awesome. I love this. Ukraine is now accepting Dogecoin donations, per Vice Prime Minister Mikhailo Fedorov. He said, quote, now even meme can support our army and save lives from Russian invaders, Fedorov tweeted. And this is awesome, man. The little coin that could, the little Doge. I think I remember when it started off years ago, the Dogecoin community gathered funds and sent the Russian, or not the Russian, they sent the Jamaican bobsled team to Jamaica using funds raised with Dogecoin. And then they pivoted and they sponsored a NASCAR team with Dogecoin and got the Doge on a NASCAR vehicle riding around the track. So that was cool. And now here we are, all these years later, the little Doge that could, funding the Ukrainian resistance against the Russian invasion, with Dogecoin. Just awesome. Wow. So yeah, I mean, for as much as people like to talk trash on Dogecoin, I mean, if this isn't good, I don't know what is. So that's awesome. And continuing on in the train of awesome, we could see this headline: Ukraine has received over $50 million in crypto donation. The Ukrainian crypto crowdfunding effort has now exceeded $50 million through almost 90,000 separate donations. And so this was reported earlier today, and I'm sure that this total is just going to keep going up. This is so awesome. They say the Ukrainian crypto crowdfunding effort has now reached $50.9 million per figures published by blockchain analytics firm Elliptic. Quote, the Ukrainian government and an NGO providing support to the military have raised $50.9 million through more than 89,000 crypto asset donations since the start of the Russian invasion, Elliptic wrote in a blog post. They say, per blockchain records, the two addresses for Bitcoin and Ethereum that the Ukrainians have posted have now received 10 million and 16 million worth of Bitcoin and Ethereum, respectively. On March 1st, 2022, the government also announced it was accepting Polkadot donations. In a later tweet, the government thanked Gavin Wood, the Polkadot founder, for the generous donation of $5 million as promised publicly. That's really cool. That's awesome. Go you, Gavin. He's also the co-founder of Ethereum. For those that aren't in the know, Polkadot, pretty cool project. All right, continuing on, they say Elliptic's blog posts also track the total amount of crypto donations that have come from the Comeback Alive, an NGO that was suspended from Patreon for funding military activity. Per Elliptic, the NGO has received, quote, several $1 million in crypto donations. Elliptic also reports that Ukraine DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization set up in aid of Ukraine, has auctioned off an NFT of the Ukrainian flag for $6.5 million worth of Ethereum. The proceeds are to be donated to the NGO, Elliptic said. So really cool stuff, this just goes to show you the power of decentralized assets and digital assets and the blockchain in general. People from all over the world are showing their support for the Ukrainians using these digital assets and cryptocurrencies. Just really, really awesome, cool stuff. I love seeing it. And finally, as we can see here, anti-war Russians start donating crypto to support Ukraine. Crypto could be one of the few ways for Russians to help Ukrainians, as any identified assistance to Ukraine is considered as high treason by the Russian state. And one of the key takeaways here is that on February 27th, Russia's General Prosecutor's Office officially warned that any assistance to Ukrainians amid Russia's, quote, special operation in the country would be considered high treason, with Russians risking being jailed for up to 20 years. But despite this, there are still Russians out there, according to this article, that are donating to support the Ukrainian resistance. So, really cool. I applaud their act of defiance. So, that pretty much wraps it up for today. This kind of gets us up to speed with where we are regarding the whole Russia-Ukraine crypto sanction situation. As always, if you enjoyed this content, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We'd really appreciate that. And with that said, thank you guys for watching, and we will see you all in the next video.